Ever feel like the way we organize teams is kind of stuck in the past? Like using a horse and buggy in a Formula One race?
Yeah, I get that.
Today, we're going to dive into a huge shift that's happening, how teams are moving away from that old top down command and control thing
Right.
and moving towards something way more flexible, self organization, and even self management.
Interesting.
So, in this deep dive, we really want to wrap our heads around how all of that actually works in practice
Yeah.
and why it's becoming so crucial now, especially with AI becoming such a big deal.
hmm
And maybe even more importantly, how can you actually cultivate this kind of dynamic within your own team?
Right.
The ideas behind all of this actually came from a really interesting video presentation we saw recently.
That makes a lot of sense. The traditional command and control structure, it's not like it hasn't worked. It's been successful for a long time, especially when things are really predictable and tasks are pretty straightforward.
Right, like an assembly line.
It's exactly assembly lines, manufacturing, that sort of thing. A clear hierarchy, everybody knows who to report to, who's making decisions.
Right, decisions get made quickly. Everybody knows what they're supposed to be doing.
There's a real efficiency in knowing exactly what needs to happen and just having that direct line of instruction.
Yeah, absolutely. If the outcome's always the same, the steps are always laid out, you just got to execute, right?
Right.
But things get really interesting when things get a bit less predictable, right? When you start dealing with volatility and complexity.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, look back at the dot-com boom, traditional waterfall project management, they were really struggling, right?
Absolutely.
Just trying to keep up with the constant change. Everything's uncertain. It's just part of the game back then. I mean, that's a big reason why Agile, the whole set of values and principles and everything that goes along with it really took off.
That's right. And that brings up a really important point. Even when things are simple, even when they're complicated, but where command and control might still feel like, it's enough, those are the areas that are really ripe for AI to just come in and automate.
That's so
Like
true.
the tasks that are really predictable, the processes that are really well defined, that's where AI could just knock it out of the park.
It makes you think about, I don't know if you saw those headlines about those managerial layoffs at Amazon recently.
Yeah, I saw that.
Now we don't know exactly what's going on internally, but they keep talking about this push to make things more agile.
Like a startup culture.
Yeah, like a startup culture, cut out all the red tape, make decisions faster.
Right.
It really seems to line up with this shift we're talking about. It's like taking what we learned from lean principles and, giving the folks who are closest to the actual work the power to make decisions.
Yeah, absolutely. It's fascinating to see all these things coming together.
Yeah.
So as AI takes on more of that routine work, it frees up human teams to focus on the stuff that's really complex and ambiguous. And that's where self-organization becomes so essential, right? You have to distribute that decision-making power to the people who are actually on the ground doing the work.
Okay, so let's dig into this idea of self-organization a bit more. I mean, the term itself can sound a little chaotic, right? Like everyone's just running around doing their own thing.
Right, yeah.
That's not really what it's about, is it?
No, not at all. It's definitely not anarchy.
Okay.
The video presentation we're talking about used this really cool phrase, the edge of chaos.
Okay.
You're dealing with complex systems. Things are going to be unpredictable. Things are going to change. I mean, that's just baked into agile work.
Yeah.
But that flexibility actually works because there's still structure there.
Okay.
There's still alignment around those outcomes, the goals everyone's working towards, like that North Star that the leadership sets.
Yeah.
And that's where leadership has to shift from being this director to
Yeah.
becoming more of an enabler, a facilitator.
So it sounds like leaders aren't just gone, their role just changes.
Exactly, yeah.
But it makes me wonder, can you just tell a team, okay, you've been doing things top down forever, but now you're self-organizing. Can it really just happen like that?
That's a great question. The video makes this awesome analogy.
Yeah.
It's like telling someone who's never ridden a bike to just jump in and compete in the Olympics.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
They haven't built those muscles, those decision-making muscles, right?
Mhm.
For years, all the decisions have been made for them. The plans have come from somewhere else. So they haven't had a chance to even figure out when a decision needs to be made, let alone how to make a good one.
So how do you go about building those decision-making muscles in a team? It's not like you can just send them off to a training course.
Right.
It's got to be something more.
The presentation talks about this really useful model called Shuhari. It's like a gradual progression, right?
Yeah.
The first stage, Shu, is all about following. So the leader is like a mentor. They're showing the way, letting the team take those baby steps and guiding them through those first few decisions.
So it's like, watch me, now you try kind of thing.
Exactly. Watch me, do it with me, now you try.
Got it.
Then you move into Ha, where the team starts to break away from those established norms, right? They start getting more confident. They've got some experience under their belt. So they start experimenting, trying new things. And then you reach that rest stage, which is like mastery, where the team's the expert. They're operating with a ton of autonomy.
You know, that really ties in with something I've heard from a lot of leaders, especially those coming from those more traditional waterfall project environments. They're always frustrated that their teams don't take ownership.
Right. Well,
But like the video points out, why would they? That's
exactly.
never really their plan, their approach to begin with.
You don't just get ownership, you have to grow it, right?
Yeah, that's a really good point.
By giving teams the power to shape those plans
Yeah.
for how the work gets done, to actually have a voice, in the process.
Yeah.
And then that safety, that psychological safety to experiment, knowing that even if a mistake happens, it's not the end of the world.
Which brings up another important point from the video that leaders have to respect those team decisions.
Absolutely.
Unless there's some imminent danger, you got to let them learn from those missteps.
Yeah, absolutely.
There was this great anecdote about a CEO, a non-technical CEO,
Yeah.
and he noticed that his teams were doing things differently than he would.
Oh, interesting.
But he was okay with it because he understood that they owned the outcome
Right.
and they were going to learn from it regardless of what happened.
That trust is huge, right?
It's huge.
It's almost contradictory to say, we're empowering you and then turn around and dictate every little detail.
Oh, yeah.
Leadership has to set those clear objectives, the desired results, the what and the why, right?
Right.
But then give the team the freedom to figure out how to get there.
Yeah.
That's what real empowerment looks like.
It's not always an easy transition, right? I mean, there are going to be roadblocks when you're trying to implement self-organization.
Yeah.
What are some of the most common ones you've seen?
The video does a great job of outlining a bunch of key challenges.
Yeah.
I think a lot of them come down to just natural human reactions.
Right.
There's that fear of failure, right? What if I make the wrong call? Especially when people aren't used to having that level of responsibility.
That was natural. Yeah.
And then there's just the whole process of figuring out how to learn from mistakes.
Yeah, it's a skill.
It's a skill, exactly.
Ah.
And then you have that tendency towards micromanaging.
Oh, yeah.
And that can come from a good place.
Yeah.
You've got a tech lead who wants to make sure the quality's top notch.
Right.
But they end up getting in there and they stifle the team's learning. And it kind of sends this message that there's no trust.
Makes sense. You know, the video also talked about resistance coming from the teams themselves,
Well, that's interesting.
which surprised me.
Yeah, it can be a surprise. But then when you think about it from their perspective, it makes total sense.
Right.
In those traditional settings, teams are under constant pressure to deliver those projects.
Right.
So when they hear about self-organization, it sounds like just one more thing piled on top of everything else.
Oh, I get it.
Like now they not only to do the work, they have to figure out the planning too.
Oh, fantastic. So how do you overcome these hurdles? It seems like a pretty massive mindset shift for everyone involved.
It definitely is. And it takes a lot of support from leadership, consistent communication, and most importantly, celebrating those little wins along the way.
Okay, so recognizing progress.
Yes, exactly. Leaders need to be there. They need to be engaged, but not dictating.
Right.
When teams show initiative, when they figure out how to solve a problem on their own, those are the things you have to acknowledge. You have to celebrate them. You have to show them that empowerment isn't just talk. It's real.
So once these self-organizing principles start to take root, what kind of positive changes do you typically see in teams?
The video points out that you start to see more collaboration, better communication both within and between teams.
Okay.
You see fewer bottlenecks in the workflow. And in the end, that means higher throughput, right?
Yeah, that makes sense.
When decision-making is distributed, things just flow better. And management's role shifts to support that, to help the team get even better at making decisions about things like who's doing what, which tasks take priority, even resolving those internal conflicts.
Yeah.
But as the presentation mentions, that often takes some initial training, some guidance to really get people comfortable with those new skills.
So now building on that idea of self-organization, there's this whole concept of self-management.
Right.
And the video kind of touched on that as like the next level, right?
Right.
What's the big difference there?
Self-management, it's like the next evolution in terms of organizational culture. The video mentions Laloux's Teal model, which is all about that distributed authority and teams that are driven by a shared purpose. A great example to give in the presentation is how these self-managed teams deal with stuff that comes up internally.
Okay.
Like, say, a team member's going through something personal.
Right.
Instead of immediately running to a manager, the team rallies around that person. They offer support. They try to figure out a solution together. They create that buffer.
Wow, that's amazing.
It creates this incredible sense of mutual support within the team.
So are you saying that in a self-managing team, the expectation is that they'll try to solve their own problems before going to management?
Absolutely. That's the ideal. Right. And then the manager's role becomes more about stepping in to mediate if things get really stuck,
Mm-hmm.
providing support from the outside if the team's resources are completely exhausted,
Right.
or maybe clarifying the bigger picture if there's real confusion about direction. It's not that managers just disappear. They're still there. But their involvement becomes more about strategy and less about that day-to-day control.
So how do you even measure success in these self-organizing, self-managing teams? You can't just look at how much each person is producing, right?
Exactly. It's
Mhm.
not about individual output anymore.
Right.
The focus shifts to the team's overall results. What impact are they having?
I see.
So things like retrospectives, those regular feedback loops, become super important for the team to constantly learn and improve.
Okay, that makes sense. One last thing the video talked about was this worry that self-organization means getting rid of managers,
Right.
which seems like a pretty big misconception.
Yeah, it's a common one. While it might feel like that sometimes, especially at the beginning of the transition,
Right.
the truth is the manager's role just transforms. Their job becomes creating the right environment for their team to thrive,
Okay.
giving them the resources they need, building trust, being transparent, using coaching techniques,
Coaching. Okay.
like asking good questions,
Yeah.
that make people think for themselves. It's a slower process than just giving people the answers.
Right.
It can be more challenging at first, but the benefits in the long run, the way it builds up that team capability and ownership, that's really powerful.
The video also mentioned how titles and tenure can actually stifle innovation. Like people are afraid to speak up.
Oh, absolutely. That's a struggle for a lot of organizations.
For sure.
It's all about creating that psychological safety where everyone feels comfortable sharing their ideas and where those ideas are judged on their own merits, not on who said them.
That's huge, right?
Absolutely huge. And then when those setbacks happen, because they will, it's about seeing them as opportunities to learn.
And us failures.
Exactly. What can we take away from this? What have we learned? Not who's to blame.
All of this seems especially relevant now with AI becoming such a big part of the picture. The video even connected self-organization with reducing risk in AI projects. How does that work?
When you bring in diverse perspectives, you're way more likely to spot those potential blind spots, the biases that can creep into AI. And the whole idea of experimenting in small increments, that's core to agile work, right? It means that the failures are smaller, more manageable, so you're reducing the risk of some massive catastrophe.
So bringing it all together, this shift towards self-organization and self-management, it's not just a fad, it's something that's becoming essential if we want to navigate this complex world, especially with AI in the mix.
Couldn't agree more.
And it seems like those old command and control models, they're just not cutting it anymore.
It's about embracing autonomy, building up those skills within teams, fostering trust, and creating that safe space where people feel comfortable speaking up and taking risks. It's not a one-time fix, it's an ongoing journey,
Absolutely.
but the potential to build teams that are adaptable, resilient, and truly innovative, that's what makes it all worthwhile.
Well, this has been a really insightful deep dive into these principles of self-organization and self-management.
My pleasure.
A huge thank you for sharing your expertise on this.
Happy to do it.
And for all of you listening, if you're really intrigued by this and want to explore it further, we highly recommend you check out the video presentation that sparked this whole conversation.
Yeah, lots of great stuff in there.
We've got links in the description. It's got even more context, some really cool real-world examples.
Definitely worth a look.
And as you're thinking about all this, maybe ask yourself, what part of your own work or your team dynamic could really benefit from a bit more self-organization? It's definitely something to ponder.
For sure.
Thanks for joining us.
See you next time.